Hello, today's chapter is Ezra chapter 10, which is the last chapter in Ezra, and that means that we have now completed, I think, 7 books together in just the past few months, which I think is really awesome. So Ezra chapter 10 kind of ties back into chapter 9 when they talk about intermarriage, which means that some of the people have married foreigners, and they were told by God not to do that. And I learned today that kind of in the same way that God instructs us to marry other Christians, He also designed that rule so that they wouldn't fall into temptation of worshiping other idols or other gods. And so, sometimes God's laws sound, odd, like what's the meaning behind that? But there's always a meaning behind it. And that's the meaning behind that. And what I think is interesting is in verse 3, it says, "Now let us make a covenant before our God to send away all these women and their children in accordance with the counsel of my Lord and those who fear the commands of our God." And basically what he's telling them is that they need to divorce the women that they have married, which is interesting because God tells us in Matthew, well, in lots of places throughout the Bible, but specifically in Matthew, chapter 19, verse 8, verse 7, it says, "Why then," they asked, "did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" And Jesus replied, "Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard." And I think this is kind of the same way. Like, God doesn't hate the person who's getting a divorce, because we're told throughout the Bible, and if you look at like the end of Romans chapter 8, that God loves us so dearly that I don't think He could ever hate us, but He hates the act of divorce, that you are the promise that you made to someone else is now broken. But in a way, you could apply it to the fact that if this people group had kind of created a marriage or such a deep relationship with God, and then they had kind of broken that by following their own personal desires and not obeying God, by divorcing the people they had married, they are now reuniting their relationship with God. So it's not that God hates the person who's getting the divorce. He hates the act of a promise being broken, but because the promise was broken between the lot that God had given them, they are now able to reunite the promise that they had made to God in the first place. So it also stood out to me that how broken and just distraught they were. And like it said, he didn't even eat for a few days, and they were confessing and praying and weeping and throwing themselves down before the house of God. Like, they were totally distraught, and because of the promise that they had broken. So those are my thoughts from Ezra 10, and I would love to hear any feedback if you had a different take on it. So I think that's all I have, and have a great day.